my problem, right? Those are not my issues. And so what 9/11 did is that we as the second and third generation realized we need to now start taking over. So for the very first time, we're having, mosques organizing, voting issues. We're having sermons talking about civic engagement. And throughout all of this, what happened was 9/11 resulted in the quintessential Americanization of Muslims. Because what does America mean? It means you fight for your rights. It means you fight to be integrated as a part of your society. Every single minority went through the exact same battles, if you like. And 9/11 was our defining moment for us, and we're still battling. It's not a done deal yet, but we're still battling. But for us, by and large, this was one of the positive effects, really, that it forced us to realize we are a part and parcel of this land. We belong here just like anybody else does. And if anybody is going to take that away from us, well, then we're going to go through the same system, the same courts, the same issues that other minorities have, and we will claim our place, the rightful place in this fabric of this country.
So it made Muslims more secular.
Exactly.
Is that a good
Exactly.
thing? A good thing or bad thing?
I think it's a necessary part of being a part of this great land of America. You can't possibly be isolationist and get anything done.
Has it produced tensions within the faith?
Of course it has. It has produced, because we still have some segments that are still attuned to the politics back home, the problems back home. But I do believe that second and third generation Americans, by and large, are going to leave that type of baggage. I don't see this basically going on beyond this generation.
Mm-hmm. And can you ever imagine yourself occupying political office, Jay? Whoa, busted him on that.
No, I can't, because I still think the climate would not tolerate that. But maybe my son, maybe my grandson. But I don't think, at least I don't see this. But I could be wrong, and I hope to be proven wrong.
I hope so, too.
Okay.
Reverend Walker, it seems, it's obvious that religion has been central to American history, from the Pilgrims and the Puritans all the way down to, let's say, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Can you talk about how the Baptist Church and its many branches have traditionally navigated the separation between church and state? Last spring, in this same room, we spoke with Andy Young about his and, of course, Dr. King's activism and the relationship of that activism to their ministry, to their system of beliefs. Can you add to this history lesson, Reverend?
Sure. I'm a little disappointed that Professor Gates didn't trace my ancestry back.
Well, I'm still open for business.
If he had, he would know that he and I are both from West Virginia.
That's right.
And born 3 days apart.
Isn't that amazing?
Okay.
But we have different daddies.
That's right.
You think?
He looks like our mother.
That's right. Yeah, there we go. I know. Yes, from almost heaven, West Virginia, and we're going that way. Right. Very, very good question. And, I was particularly impressed with Ambassador Loeb's discussion about Roger Williams. Roger Williams was just an amazing person. He started the idea of the separation of church and state in this country. The Puritans came to Massachusetts Bay Colony to get religious liberty, but what they achieved for themselves, they turned around and denied to everybody else, including Roger Williams. And so he went off to Rhode Island and founded the first Baptist church on North American soil. And you can still go there and see it. The first Baptist church in America is right at the foot of the hill below Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. So Roger Williams set the tone for Baptists in this country, talking about the separation of church and state. The magistrate really had no authority over the souls of his subjects. And we had two kingdoms there, and the garden of the church, as Williams talked about it, had to be separated from the wilderness of the world. And he did use the metaphor of the wall or hedge of separation between church and state that Thomas Jefferson later popularized more. But so Roger Williams set the tone for Baptist, and we've pretty much followed suit throughout the years. The separation of church and state, as we understand it today, and as as Roger Williams thought about it, does not divorce religion from politics. I mean, Baptists, unlike our Anabaptist cousins who sort of withdrew from society and from political engagement, we Baptists rolled up our sleeves and got involved in politics, motivated by the religious conviction and also tempered by that understanding that there needs to be an institutional separation between church and state. But it doesn't mean that we have to go hide someplace and not try to make it a better world. So it was in that tradition that other folks from Massachusetts, Isaac Backus, went down and lobbied the Continental Congress, and John Leland from Massachusetts, who went down and became an evangelist in Virginia during that heady decade of the 1780s, standing toe-to-toe with Madison and Jefferson and Mason, insisting upon an explicit guarantee in the First Amendment, protecting religious freedom and separating church and state, and brought political pressure on Madison to make sure that Madison, the father of our Constitution, put that in there. Madison at first didn't think we needed a Bill of Rights, but John Leland and others convinced him otherwise, and so down through the years, and M.L. King and others stand in that same tradition, believing in the institutional separation of church and state, but understanding that we need to put feet to our beliefs and to get involved in making this a better world in which to live. Andy Young too. I mean, so that's. Kind of the balancing act that we've done. I spent a lot of my time saying, but I'm not that kind of Baptist. You know what I mean? Because there are a lot of Baptists out there today that don't believe in what we've just talked about. They don't believe in the separation of church and state. But at our best, throughout the years and centuries, we have done it, and I think that this country's better off for it.
Good, thank you. Yasser, attacks on Muslims and Jews and black church burnings haven't, of course, to our great heartbreak, disappeared in this country, and I don't think they're about to disappear. Despite our constitutional guarantee of religious freedom, and despite the strides that we've made, tremendous strides toward tolerance, there are not only 3 religions in this country, but scores. We mustn't overlook the horrific attack on the Sikh temple in Milwaukee in 2012. The most recent example that we've all heard about is, of course, the murder of 3 Christian people at a Jewish community center in Kansas City. Now, I find this tragedy to be filled with complexities that resonate with the issues of religious pluralism, tolerance, and freedom that we're addressing here this afternoon. So, Sheikh Qadi, can you tell us your community's response to this event and how you, as a spiritual leader, lead them through the questions that these events raise?
Well, firstly, let us realize that these events aren't just on the social scale. They're also on the political scale as well. And speaking to my own experiences, when I just moved to Tennessee in 2010, straight off of Yale again, so when I just moved to Tennessee, the Tennessee State Senate was actually trying to ban the practice of Sharia. 22 states in America have attempted to ban Sharia. Now, Sharia for Muslims is like the halakha for Jews. That's exactly, in fact, the term means the same thing. It's a path, right? Halakha means a path, right? Sharia is a path. And for a Muslim to not practice Sharia means they're not a Muslim. Tennessee was banning the Sharia, and the state legislator was about to vote for it. We lobbied, I had just moved there to Tennessee, we lobbied all of the mosques across the state. We, carted busloads of people to the state capitol, and on a very rainy day, 250 Muslims were petitioning, and outside the state capitol, we walked into the one of the state congressman's office who wanted to see us, and we learned the hard way that it was basically too late to change that bill. But he did tell us some very important information. He said, "Where were you when all of this was building up? You're coming to me at the 11th hour, and you're trying to now influence us. You are 250 people. You could have caused an impact and change." So we're lobbying, obviously, at the political level. At the local level, I remember when the Boston tragedy happened, and again, this is another problem for American Muslims, when the bombers with the 2 Tsarnaev brothers, when they did their bombing. So our mosque was basically threatened. And so I had to give a sermon the day after, I think it was a tragedy, in which at the same time I'm sending my condolences as an American to what's happening. We dissociate from the terror. We say there's nothing to do with us. And then we have a protocol about safety, about mosque safety, about women might not want to wear their headscarves, for the next few days. So it's this dual a balancing act that we have to negotiate. When the Sikh temple was attacked, now in all likelihood that was meant for Muslims. In all likelihood, they thought these Sikhs were actually were Muslims. We actually visited the Sikh temple in Memphis and gave them our condolences. But once again, a part of what we said was, look, we're sorry. I know it was meant at us, but they came at you guys. Like, that's what we're basically telling the Sikhs, right? We're sorry. We know they wanted to kill us. They ended up killing you guys, whatever we can do to help out. So we're really being put in a kind of awkward situation. And I don't think there's an easy, one-line answer to this. It's just an ongoing process, ongoing education, talking, lecturing, action. It's just a lot of work. And if that's what God wants us to do, well, then that's what we're going to do.
Okay. Angela, young people, of course, are the hardest to attract to the religion conversation in the United States and probably everywhere else. Though I'm sure here at Harvard, will be a lot of praying going on during exam period this month. Yet young people are often the most open to new ideas and people, new technologies, new belief systems, right? It's a paradox. So, Rabbi, how do you view these issues in the lives of the young today? Where do you see the opportunities for dialogue? And what are you going to do? You have 2 children, right?
3.
3. So what are you going to do when one brings home a Muslim, one brings home a Baptist, and one brings home a Sikh? Whoa.
Yeah. Pray. No, I think, let's see. One of the things that, there was a wonderful book, I think he's a Harvard professor. Isn't Robert Putnam, doesn't he teach here?
Yeah.
Yes.
In the government
He wrote American Grace, which was a fantastic study of religion in America. And in particular, what was really stunning was among young people, I can't remember exactly what the age bracket was, but younger than me, if you remove the Hispanic population and the Black population, in which the children in those communities are more likely to stay the religion of their birth, the rest of the population will change their religious affiliation at a rate of almost 40%, meaning like the religion they were born into, 40% of them will change their religion, meaning, and usually it's happening on a local level. They fall in love with somebody, or they're kind of shopping around at houses of worship, and they just end up liking a particular pastor or minister better. We happen to have an Exploring Judaism class, which is in some ways, it's for people who are interested in Judaism. And in 3 years at Central Synagogue, we've had more than 200 students and 80 conversions, which is actually quite astounding amongst all young people. And we're not going out there knocking on anybody's door. But the reality is, I think young people are actually tremendously open to, there's a fluidity of their sense of identity. And I don't think that that's because they don't actually have convictions. I think that they were raised to say, we find what's universal between us. We see, I embrace all. I think that that's the way our children are being raised, and that's actually a victory of the way that we want to raise our children. We don't see the differences, we see the similarities. I have noticed in my, I guess, almost 20 years as a rabbi, a marked difference just since 2 decades ago, where we take our 10th graders away on a retreat and we talk about dating, because as you probably know, Jews, we just like it when our Jews marry other Jews. And we try to get them to do that. And so we had this conversation about dating, and I remember that 20 years ago, kids would always say, oh yeah, I'm gonna marry somebody Jewish and I'll raise Jewish children. Now, 20 years later, our kids say, if I fall in love with a Muslim, I want to marry them, and hopefully I'll raise my kids as Jews, but maybe I won't. But you know what? If we are, aligned, and maybe I'll even convert to Islam. I seriously had that conversation. And there was a part of me that felt like, wow, we've done something right in terms of what we're teaching about really a true openness and tolerance of other religions. And in some ways, I'd say the language is different, but perhaps fundamentally there's much more that's similar than that divides us. At the same time, as a rabbi, I'm very torn, because I do actually worry about the continuity of my religion and our people and our culture. And I guess part of what I have to say is that it has to have meaning for people. There has to be a reason that you do it, and it's not just for the sake of its own continuity. It has to have something that brings tremendous meaning and significance to your life. And I also have to still believe that others offer that as well. So I've had that thought about what happens when my son now goes to a school that is a public school in Manhattan. It's a fantastic school. It's over 60% Asian, and it's a very different experience for him. He used to go to a Jewish day school, and so then it was not an issue because his friends were all Jewish. Now his friends are every color, and 70% of them are from immigrant families. So it's quite a different experience, and he's coming back with really wonderful different ideas, and it's challenging to me. So it's great. But I think in some ways that's I think their openness. By the way, just one last thing is that many of them, as I said, they're a large population that also are not particularly affiliated religiously, but almost all of them say we're spiritual. So there's something there they're looking for. They're finding it in lots of different ways. So religious communities and faith communities have to find our reason for being, or we're not going to be able to have the next generation interested in joining faith communities. But I believe in what we have.
It reminds me, my senior year at Yale, I brought home, my girlfriend happened to be white. My mother was very nice to her. She said, "Can I talk to you?" She said, "No colored girls at Yale?"
It's funny. My sister went to Stanford and she brought home a nice Korean boy, and my mom taught me to the kitchen and said, "Can't you find a nice Jewish boy?" My mother's Korean, but so you just never know.
Last in our cycle of questions, Brent. There's been so much controversy swirling around my friend Neil deGrasse Tyson's new rendition of Cosmos, which just aired on Fox, only reminding us of the deep tensions that exist in our country between many religious conservatives and, let's say, those who put faith and reason into science. Arguably, this is a crucial bridge to be built in the years ahead, especially with regard to the young people Rabbi Buchdahl just spoke about. How can our religious leaders and communities do a better job of bridging the gap to science, of not minimizing its importance to our children's education, while also avoiding having our own religious teachings drowned out?
Good question, and difficult question. I think
And I should say, I have, in my own family, on my mother's side, I have a bunch of cousins who think the world was created in 7 days, man. That's just, and the earth is 4,000, whatever they say.
5774.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's an important question, and I think the answer is that it's got to be, there's got to be a both and solution. It can't be either or. I mean, we can't bifurcate the world and life in two between faith and science. I think that they both bring knowledge to the conversation. Different kinds of knowledge and understanding, but still both are very important to bring in and to be held in tension. I know it's a particularly, since we're involved in constitutional issues so much at the Baptist Joint Committee, it always gets into the public schools. What if you teach creationism in the science class? And of course, the Supreme Court has said you can't do that, and properly so. I mean, creationism is fundamentally a religious affirmation, and it shouldn't be allowed to masquerade as science in the science class. But you can teach about the controversies swirling around creationism in social studies, history, other appropriate places in the curriculum. Make that knowledge available to the students without trying to shoehorn it into the science class. So. And then teaching about religion, not in a way that indoctrinates, but with an educational goal in mind, to talk about the fact that the various creation accounts throughout the different religious traditions that they're all there. So you don't have to ignore either one. It can be both and. They just have to be done in the proper context.
Mm-hmm. Okay. A final summing up question for all three, and then we'll open it up to you guys. Now, in the divide between the culture wars and the struggles for social justice, how can our religious leaders and communities do a better job working toward common goals to help common people instead of being viewed as one more channel for reinforcing differences? Do you guys see specific debates over the next few years in which you hope to see a broader interfaith movement mobilized to effect change? And more personally, who are your role models on the world stage who are the best practitioners of interfaith dialogue and action? And how do you try to emulate them in your own work? Angela, would you start?
I feel very fortunate that the community organizing work I've been a part of is a coalition of faith-based organizations, and that among the issues that I think that we have to tackle are issues around gun control and violence, around really just the quality of education in our country for all of our children, issues of also income inequality. I think the reason why we need to do this is because each of these are moral issues that are rooted in all of our faith traditions on a deep level in terms of what it does for the dignity of all people and the opportunity for all and the ability for each person to really be realized in their fullest potential. And I also think it's very important, coming back a little bit to the question you asked me about young people, I think that if religion and faith communities are not actually talking about the kinds of issues that are the most pressing in people's lives, issues around violence around them and hatred, and if we don't feel like we can make a difference in that, then we really don't have a reason for being anymore. We have to speak out. And going back to our prophetic tradition, that's what our prophets have always done, spoken out in some ways to make that world better. I think about my friend and colleague, Reverend Jackie Lewis, in terms of a role model. She's at Middle Collegiate Church, and she recently she had some gun violence in her community and that affected members of her church, and they ended up doing what I would call an ethical spectacle, and they took a gun and they smelted it down right on the steps of their church and made it into a garden implement.
Oh, wow.
Taking the prophetic words of Isaiah to turn your swords into plowshares, your spears into pruning hooks. And I thought it was so powerful that she was rooting this in our faith tradition and knowing very much that this is our ethical mandate, but she was taking it into today's world. Mm-hmm. So that, to me, is an example of what our faith communities need to continue to work on. It can't just be about religious ritual or the continuation of our own small little pocket of the world. Mm-hmm. We really need to be out in the world doing the work that God intended us to do and that our tradition mandates for us to do.
Oh, great. Well put. Yasser?
I'm a firm believer in changing the term interfaith dialogue into interfaith action, because talk is cheap and actions speak louder than words. And in Memphis, we realized that we're getting together every year for an annual interfaith dinner and banquet and whatnot, but we're not doing anything. And so we decided we're not just going to talk. We actually decided to have an interfaith initiative together. And for the last 2 years, we've had a joint project where we go and feed the homeless, and we have a system where there's an elderly groups that can't shop for themselves. We deliver the supplies to them. And so we basically alternate. 1 week, one church will do it, another week the mosque will do it, and we deliver the supplies to them. And so I think it's very easy to actually demonstrate to the world the power, the positive power of religion. Dialogue with your co-religionists, find out common good that everybody wants to do. I think, honestly, I have to say this, it's a shame that anybody in this great land goes to sleep hungry. It's a shame that any child does not have a roof over their heads. It's really a shame, no matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter. And there's common ground. I mean, and I actually told this to the pastor who had that conversation with me. I actually said, you know what? It's even if you think whatever the verdict is in the next life, in this world we can all agree that we don't want a child to be hungry. Can we do something about that in the meantime? Mm-hmm. Even if you think whatever is going to happen to you in the next life, in this world, Memphis has a serious problem. Our cities have serious problems in crime, in poverty. And so, we actually did begin this initiative. And so really, my whole philosophy is a lot less talk and a lot more action. As for who I look up to, I have to say the one person that I genuinely admire immensely is Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Mm-hmm. That obviously he's from a different faith tradition than mine, and that's the whole point of interfaith dialogue and respect. Firstly, he's got the coolest accent in the world. Secondly, he's not just a theologian. Religion isn't just abstract. Mm-hmm. It's really changing the world in a positive manner. And I have been following his works and listening to his lectures, and I haven't had the pleasure of ever meeting him, but you want to know my hero in terms of interfaith dialogue and work, it's somebody like, Desmond Tutu.
He's a cool dresser, too.
That too, yeah.
He likes that Easter purple thing. He really works. That's great. Brent.
Yeah, as I said in my opening remarks, this bottle is half full, not half empty. So I'm very optimistic about our ability to make this happen. I think what Angela and Yasser have said is absolutely right on target. I can't improve upon that. Yes, action is important. Talking is important. Getting to know each other, building trust. Action seals the deal, and that's extremely helpful. In the Baptist tradition, I must look to President Jimmy Carter. as a hero who has been prophetic, who's been involved with interfaith and interracial healing and activities in a way that I think is very special, and I always have looked up to him and hope to emulate, except for the president's part. I'm not won't be having the opportunity to vote for me for president, but as a Baptist layperson, he's about as good as it gets.
Great, thank you. Let's give it up for our panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Excellent job. Now, the floor is open. Questions? No speeches, just questions. Yes?
Reverend Ken Turley from the Swedenborgian Church. I'd like to ask you, as individuals and representing your faith tradition.
Could you speak in the microphone? It's just for the recording that's being made,
Absolutely.
which we'll have for sale on the way out.
I would like to ask you, as individuals and representing your faith traditions, if you believe that the divine is, and the diversity of faith traditions is a result of the diversity of human response to divine, or if in fact Yahweh and Allah and God are different, and how that affects your work in interfaith activities.
You want to direct it toward one person, or you want all three of them to?
I'd love to hear all three responses
Okay.
if we have time.
Brent, you want to start?
A very serious and difficult theological question. I think they are essentially the same. I mean, obvious differences there, but I think the main differentiation that we perceive from this side is a different way that we approach the divine. So I don't want to say that Judaism and Islam and Christianity is all the same, because it's not. But I think God is God, irrespective of the name we use to address him or her.
Yasser?
Well, the